This week's breaking news, terrible news, was the publication of a report on pederasty committed by religious priests and also by lay people linked to the church in France. The data are shocking. They speak of 216,000 victims, an appalling figure. There is talk of more than 3,000 priests and religious involved. It is true that in the framework of 70 years, but still an appalling figure. However, first of all, we should not minimize the situation. The issue is very serious, but we must also look at these data with caution. For example, only 243 personal interviews have been made. No more than 3,000 emails of complaints have been received. We're not, therefore, in front of proven cases before justice. We are in front of some cases, probably many of which are true. Just one would be very serious, and there are more than one, but they are cases that have served those who have made the report to extrapolate these data to 70 years and say that approximately, because they themselves say that there is a margin of error of 50,000 no less, that approximately in 70 years, with 110,000 priests who lived in France at that time, approximately 216,000 victims have suffered pederasty at the hands of priests and religious. We should not minimize the situation, but we must be very prudent. These are not proven cases. There have been, it seems, about 6,000 reports, which does not mean that there have been 6,000 convictions, 2,000, almost 3,000 emails. The report through an email can be considered as a true fact. 243 victims or probable or possible victims interviewed. An extrapolation have been made that gives a gigantic figure that is almost certainly greatly exaggerated. We must be very careful, lest by accepting these figures we are given rise to accusations that are not true. That there has been pederasty for sure. That a single case is serious, of course, but 16,000 and nobody has found out about it in 70 years. Another thing they tiptoe over is the fact that there have been 5.5 million cases of pederasty in France at that time, which means that the church would be liable for, if that is true, and I am sure that this figure is not authentic, because if it is true, she would be liable for 4%. But no one talks about the remaining 96% of victims, only about what the church has hypothetically done. Two other things that are hardly mentioned, but which appear in the report, is that most of these cases, alleged cases, took place after the Second Vatican Council. There is an increase in the curve of the incidence of abuse, which then falls and decreases. Is the abuse of minors related to the way in which the Second Vatican Council was applied in France and elsewhere? Why don't you go deeper into this? Because perhaps there is a relationship to the extent that there was a lack of control and self-control, that is to say, to the extent that it was thought that everything was valid and that sexual norms were no longer important, because in some, I do not know if in many, the demons that were inside came out to do misdeeds. Another fact that is also overlooked is that more than 80% of these alleged victims are boys or male adolescents, which does not coincide with the percentage in civil society. This indicates that there is a serious problem of homosexuality in the clergy, but they do not want to touch it. We cannot say that a homosexual for being homosexual is a pederast at all, just as you cannot say that a heterosexual for being heterosexual is a pederast, but that is a fact to be taken into account. Let us be very prudent, because otherwise we can play into the hands of those who elaborate reports without a scientific basis in order to harm the Church, which is already sufficiently beaten by itself. So with this, it is not surprising that the figure of the priest is totally discredited, and that what happened in Ireland happened. This year, in all the dioceses of Ireland, including Northern Ireland, only 4 young men entered the seminary in the whole country. Ireland, one of the great Catholic nations of Europe and the world, this year has only 4 seminarians for all the dioceses of the country. It is a tragedy. And those who do not realize what is happening and what is going to happen is because they do not want to see it. Another point of attention this week was once again Germany. It is like the lightning that does not cease, Germany, but this time in a different form. The organizing council of their synodal path has met, and as they did not have a quorum, that is to say that not even among themselves they do not have enough interest to go to the meetings, and now there is no longer the excuse of the epidemic. They had to cancel the meeting, and the only thing they did was to say that with 2 years that they have been delivering and dizzying the partridge, well, that is not enough time, and that they need until 2023 2 more years, and they say that at least they will have us 4 years with periodic assemblies to discuss things that cannot be approved. I get the impression that they know that Pope Francis is not going to accept the conclusions of the synod, and that they have decided to postpone those conclusions for at least 2 more years. They say that at least until 2023, to see if a new pope comes, they think, more in line with their liberal Protestant positions. At the moment in this assembly, they were reflecting on the role of the laity as priests, based on the common priesthood of the faithful, also called real priesthood, linked to the sacrament of baptism, because they know they have no priest. But if they have no priest and people do not go to Mass, and religious practice has fallen brutally in Germany, will more priests go because they see a distinguished lady dressed as if she were a priest doing a parody of Mass on an altar? Anyway, let's see what happens. They give us 2 more years of having us periodically arguing about the pilgrim things they come up with. Another fact has been the trials in the Vatican. There have been 2. Well, there has been a sentence and a trial attempt. The most striking is the one involving Cardinal Becciu and other former members involved in the Vatican economy. There are some accusations against them, of course, especially against the Cardinal, accusations that the defense has asked for evidence, because the evidence is a conversation with a repentant who was the Cardinal's secretary. Well, the defense has asked for the evidence to be presented. The president agreed with the defense and said that the evidence should be provided, and the prosecution refused to provide the evidence. This week, when the hearing took place, there was a big scandal, a loud scandal, and in the end, the president had to dissolve the hearing. dissolve the appointment and postpone it for another month until November and demand that the prosecution, that is to say, the accusation, to present the evidence. How is there going to be a trial if not even the defense has the evidence in hand of what they are accusing their defendants of? For now, the trial is postponed, but whether or not there is a sentence, even if there is a trial or not, remains to be seen. What has happened is that there has been a sentence. It was news that among the altar boys who assist in the Basilica of St. Peter in the Vatican, there had been sexual abuse or sexual relations to priests, and some seminarians were involved. This week, the sentence has been known, and it turns out that they are innocent. They are innocent. That is what the sentence said. They are innocent, that there was no sexual abuse. This was a very mediatic case. Shouldn't this case serve as an example before the accusations that are being launched in France and in other countries? Unfortunately, there are many things that have happened, but maybe they are using us as a scapegoat to cover up what is happening in other areas. In France, 96% of the abuses had nothing to do with the church, or they are using all that, magnifying it, to hurt a church that they already see in its low hours, or perhaps in the lowest hours of recent times. Prudence and trust in God. See you next week, God willing.